Welcome to New Earth Studios, Love Now by Alex Roseman. We are here in the heart of the wilderness of Dubai. From our beautiful New Earth Cafe, the Conscious Eatery, where we'll be bringing you conscious conversations with our very next guest. Please do your best to click the subscription button so you can see us evolve and grow and ultimately show up in a community near you. Thank you.
Trigger warning. This episode may contain content that could be distressing to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back, man. It's good to see you.
And you. Thanks for having me back. And yeah, it's nice to be here. New Earth was kind of a real second home. Sometimes a sort of first home.
It is like that, isn't it?
Yeah, nice to kind of be back in the fold, so to speak.
Yeah, well, you know, what was your impressions of New Earth? You know, what was the positives, negatives?
It's a nice little I kind of view it as a nice little nature reserve, really, in the kind of midst of a hectic Dubai life. I love the plants. I love being surrounded by this kind of atmosphere of forestation. I love feeling that connection back with nature. And yeah, the food and the drinks are always amazing as well. So it's a place that I come to be enriched, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Enriched. I wonder how the glasses are looking on the camera, reflecting back or not. But you're wearing them because obviously to help with your...
I've got some kind of allergy going on.
Okay.
And quite like the yellow glasses. My friend just gave these to me, but I'll do without them for a bit and see.
Well, you want whatever you feel comfortable, man. I mean, your eyes look great to me.
I'm getting this thing where when the air hits my eyes, they start streaming. So
okay, if they start streaming, then you put those glasses back on. Unless it's something I've said and it's touched a nerve, and then that's a different story. You might go, I need to put my glasses on. It's the allergies. It's the allergies.
Yeah, there you go.
I get it, what you're doing, preparing yourself.
Just drinking this superb, flavorful, fantastic, healthy drink, and not in any way promoting it to the onlooker, but...
What is it? Which one is it?
It is a peach matcha coconut delight, really. And yeah, it just tastes heavenly.
Well, you know, for some people it's heavenly. For some people it might taste like hell, but I'm glad it's heavenly for you.
It's wonderful.
My man. So look, you know, it's been a little while since we last kind of connected. And then we connected not too long ago. And, you know, you're on your journey, as everybody is. Now, what makes it unique is, you know, you're in this field of psychology and you've met some obviously interesting characters, yourself being one of them. And, you know, let's sort of open up a little bit. I mean, I don't want this to be just a kind of mental, you know, badminton match, but maybe something where we can go into something that's real. Because, you know, like if we were having a conversation, just say there was no cameras and microphone, that we just having a chat as we would do, maybe before or after this. How would that look? You know, what would we talk about?
Well, the first thing we'd talk about is what we've been up to, I suppose, what's been going on. So I guess that's a good place to start. So I've been just super busy, kind of working. I think Dubai is strange in that it creates this kind of space where work doesn't feel laborious, you know, in a way. But that's all I seem to kind of do. I'm really kind of focused on a number of different projects I'm involved in, private therapy, and obviously the academic kind of racket, which is the kind of main thing. So I've been teaching a few modules at the university, mainly in crime and antisocial behaviour, and in different therapeutic modalities like CBT and acceptance and commitment therapy. And I've been writing a book. So and I finished it. I finally finished the book, and it's just been painful. There's so much I want to talk about with it. There's so much to talk about, both the content of the book and what it's designed to do, or what I hope it does, and also the actual process of writing a book, and the toll it takes, and just the monumentous kind of pressure that I ended up putting myself under with it all. So yeah, that's what I've been up to. So I guess we could start there.
Well, we can start with a shot. Thank you so very much. Well, to you and completing the book.
Thank you so much.
In some way, I think this black shot symbolizes quite a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, it probably does. I don't suppose there's anything naughty in here, is there? This is what charcoal...
You wish. Some charcoal magic. Bon appetito.
Ooh, that's very pleasant.
You know, charcoal helps absorb some of the toxins to then help you dispel it from one's body. So nice though.
Yeah,
you know, it's
that's
nice.
really nice.
Black
Tastes
teeth now,
really
like a
sweet.
pirate.
Yeah. I also have Invisalign going on here, so that
No,
might,
it's all good. It's all invisible. Don't worry, including your teeth. How does that happen? So okay, man. Look, writing a book. I remember when you were tackling that book about, was that a year ago? When we were last sort of speaking and like doing the podcasts and jumping and delving into all this stuff.
It's gone on for an embarrassingly long amount of time. I've had the contract to write this darn thing for over 4 years, but I just didn't do it for 3. To be fair, I moved countries 3 times and COVID and blah blah blah. But I just put it off and put it off and put it off, and then for some reason in June last year, 2023, I kind of carved out a bit of space. I'd started a new position. I wasn't teaching for a few months and just had some time to really sit down with it. And I kind of just did that. I just thought, right, I'm just going to sit down with this and just look at it and just start writing and not put any pressure on any outcome. And I just hit a good vein of form, started kicking it out. And after a couple of months, I thought, you know what, if I carry on at this pace, I think I can do this thing. So finally, it's done, and I'm delighted that it's done. I'm one of those frustrating people that can't seem to ever be truly happy with things. My partner Desiree asked me, am I proud of it? And I was like, not really. Are you pleased with it? I don't know, but I am really pleased that it's done. I think it will hopefully impact a few people's lives, and it'll be a good addition to the criminal psychological space. So,
all right. Well, you know what? Thank you for that honesty. What does that feel like? That moment of feeling proud, but we'll go into it a little bit about duality, and feeling pride means that we're suppressing shame. So ultimately, not feeling that means that you're a sort of non-shame, non-pride. It was just sort of something that you needed to get done. Yeah. And though you got it done, and the feeling of accomplishment that may have came over like, oh, one less thing that fills time and space in my head is now on paper, right?
Yeah,
it's out there.
That's the amazing thing. Like I do feel good about that. I actually finished it completely last night after another 2 days of non-stop writing, and I finished the conclusion, sent it, and then just thought, oh, that was garbage. Can't stand it. Awful. I should have done this, should have done that. So I did a good thing. I printed it off, and this morning, and just forgot about it. And this morning, reread it again in a new state, in the sunshine with a coffee in Greek Harbour, and I was like, you know what? It's pretty good. It's pretty good, actually.
Little pat on the back there, lad.
There you go. It's pretty good. So,
what is it for? I mean, for anybody who was going to pick up a book like this, what can someone gain out of it in a quick summary?
It's a book about making meaning in prison. So I worked with a lot of individuals incarcerated for a range of crimes between 2014 and 2020, and generated a lot of research on the experience of incarceration and imprisonment, and the experience of finding meaning behind bars. And I specifically zoned in on peer support in prison. So there are a lot of peer support programs in prisons whereby prisoners themselves can take on active citizenship roles, and they support fellow inmates with their despair. And so I was really interested in how those individuals were generating meaning from those roles, and wound up doing a big interview project looking at the experience of just that, the phenomenological experience, the reality of being a peer supporter, an altruistic individual in such a deprived and brutal environment like prison. So it's a book about peer support in prison. It's a book about how people find meaning in the depths of despair, within the wider circumstances of stigmatization and marginalization and ostracism. And it's a book, therefore, about how we might be able to do justice differently. Our ideas of justice and crime and punishment and incarceration in my view, are still quite sort of retributive and archaic. And so my book proposes maybe a different way of doing things, which is taking some responsibility as communities for the problem of crime, which is our problem, and responding to it as an issue of interbeing.
You know what?
Yeah.
I absolutely agree with you. And I think the last time we spoke, I'm putting my book together at the moment. And this one is, I was writing just before coming here, and, you kind of hit that wall with like, what? Put it down. Some bits inspire you. Some bits a bit like, you step away from just to breathe for a little bit. Because it's taken me, I took a year break already and coming back to it. And it's a manual, right? It's something that, what is it to be from the old earth to the new earth? That progression, and obviously this is an area where we have this sort of archaic mentality about criminals and how that they're wrong and they deserve what it is they deserve. And ultimately we all get what we deserve. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong or right within the universal law, but it's our sort of mentality, the stigma that people are sort of left with, and then ultimately they can't get rid of that stigma, so they keep perpetuating the crimes because they feel like they're not worthy of anything else. So as a society we kind of keep this going at our own detriment, while it obviously costs us money. And so there's this idea that that what happens when a criminal does something or acts out, they're ultimately expressing what society is suppressing, because you can't have one without the other. So ultimately they're actually doing the community a service. Whatever our fantasies are of different things that it might be, from murder to rape to all of these things that people may have in their mind, but they don't act it, that in the collective consciousness needs to come out from somewhere, like a pressure cooker, that somebody has to act out what it is that other people are suppressing. So it is absolutely, you're spot on, that it is a collective responsibility, rather than saying, well, they acted it out, it's their fault, and so let's put them away somewhere. And
and that's it. I mean, your kind of conceptualization and ideas behind the new earth, I might translate to, I guess, a new society within which we, as communities within that society, choose to take responsibility for collective problems. And so tying, my work into your interest, into your kind of project, I suppose, I would really rely on ideas of interconnectedness and interbeing as solutions to contemporary social problems. And that's really a lot about what my book is about. If you think about crime, an individual commits a crime, and then they have to suffer the consequences of whatever that's going to mean. And historically, what that involves is a series of degradation rituals. Someone commits a crime, there's an arrest, there's a process in a court, it's very kind of ritualized, it's very ceremonious, and then there might be prison, which further degrades the individual, and the individual has to serve this kind of repeated ongoing sentence of sort of redemption, repentance, punishment, and all the rest of it. And maybe that's the way that people want to go. I kind of argue, and science argues, that that's just not working. 67% of people reoffend within 2 years of leaving prison in the UK. 77% do the same in the US. Even in Norway, which is which kind of tops the tables for doing things well, is around 23%. So that's still 1 in 4 people that are going to reoffend within 2 years. So it ain't working, really. And I think it's not working because when somebody commits a crime, there is a response which is a dissonant response. An institution, an external dissonant institution, takes control of what happens next. And that usually involves removing the individual from the community in which the crime took place, rather than a community response which is involved and ingrained. We kind of detach ourselves and give this powerful institution, i.e. prison or whatever, the responsibility of taking control of what actually is a community problem. And so I think that as communities, we need to kind of approach crime with some collective responsibility. That doesn't mean that we're responsible, of course, for somebody's transgression or someone's crime, but we could look at crime as a collective responsibility issue. And I think if we do that, we'll do a lot better at kind of rehabilitating, or whatever word you want to use.
No, fair enough. Look, when you mentioned before that, it's not working. Well, I say it's working for some, but maybe not working for others, right? People are benefiting from this system, however it is, and it's keeping jobs going. So there is a system around it that, wrong or right, it is perpetuating this sort of illusion that things are working for those who need a job and those who make money from it, and those MPs and those. There's like a structure that works. However, if we step out of it and go, well, is it sustainable? Are we actually seeing growth? Well, if the numbers are saying something else, then the numbers don't lie. There is a new way, but we know how long certain systems can take to start to shift, because there's so many things sort of leveraging from it that, when you have your voice in your book and yes, people are saying it, then what? And I've noticed that, like everybody, nothing really happens. We can have our theories, we've had, I've mentioned it before, scientists who have come along like Maxwell and Faraday, they have their theories. But until we can conceptualize it and put it into action, these things are kind of yes, okay, I'll get back to it someday. And especially, people who are in government and have a certain power to just sort of live off talking as if something's going to happen, and it pays for their way. Very rarely something actually takes hold. So, who's that responsibility lie on? And as you said, it's our responsibility. And there's something empowering about a community actually coming together and going, okay, what if we actually took it as our responsibility and not rely on the government and all the hierarchy people who obviously have our best interests at heart, because they're not living in the community. Why would they care? They can say they care, but is their heart into it? And it's no fault, no judgment. And that's the thing, not to judge, say, government, and it's not to judge the criminals, and it's not to judge ourselves for the situation we're in. This is just a matter of evolving our consciousness because of the feedback we're getting, and if we choose to act on it or not.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that, the default reaction or the default response to issues of community harm or social harm is to rely on systems of power, and those systems of power are such because we prop them up. We don't maybe critically question them, and we don't take responsibility as communities, and that serves the powerful even more. If you take prison as an example, you're right that many people may well benefit from the labour of prisoners and from the prison industrial complex and all it does to kind of wash away deliberately the vitality of human life. But we can ask, better questions of these systems, and we can get involved, and we can be active participants in deconstructing those cruel systems of power that really don't restore communities. And that's what I'm super passionate about. So much so that I do get, to my shame maybe, to my detriment, irritated and angry when people want to defer to structures of power to resolve community problems. Just as a silly example, where I live, there's a group in for the community, a WhatsApp group, and there's kind of an obsession with calling the police when something happens in the community, or an obsession with deferring to some kind of local authority to resolve community-based issues. And it just winds me up. Whenever you've got an opportunity as a community to come together to resolve a community issue, it's a real chance to kind of combine and organise and connect and inter-exist. And I think we often waste that opportunity. But all of this revolves around a willingness to accept social problems as, again, our problems. And I think the fact that we live in a super capitalistic, individualistic sort of world means that we're often blaming, and we're often looking to kind of assign blame to individuals and things rather than kind of take collective responsibility for things. So.
You know what? Look, Christian, you're a cool guy, intelligent, right? There's charisma that you have, but there's also something that I feel there's a weight on you. And it's funny that you're looking to find meaning for those in prison. Because I feel like there's an affinity for you that resonates with those people, though they are in a prison. In some ways, like you relate to them because you may potentially be in your own prison of your mind, and because you've got, and I recognize it because I see it in myself, right? You've got so smart in your psychology and in the style and the proverbs and the narratives and the way how to elude yourself from something that you ultimately want to connect to. But with all of this, it sort of acts as your warden. It's like you have the warden inside you and you're the prisoner and the freedom is here. Prisoner, freedom, and then the critic.
Yeah,
which
maybe.
is your warden, right? And it's like, and it can get exhausting because I'm saying for myself here, so you're not alone, right? When I learn something new, and I'm learning a new style, and I've learned something, and then I'm like, wow, and then I'm with my wife, and I have my new perspective. Suddenly, my consciousness shifts, and suddenly I have a new perspective on life, and I feel empowered to do. Like I trust my perspective of how I see reality now that much more. Which then challenges my wife's perspective, how she sees reality, because suddenly I feel empowered for some reason. And I had this episode in December that just came. And then I stepped forward and suddenly I was like, this surge of like this new reality was unfolding in front of me. And it took a while before I would allow my wife's perspective to be shared, to then see the whole perspective. Because it was as if I had this surge of power, this energy, but I didn't want it to be taken away because my perception of reality was not correct or not right. And so I was holding on to that for some reason more than I usually would do, because maybe I'd suppressed myself, which I had done for a lot of my life, because I was trusting in other people's perception of reality. I didn't trust my own as much. So when I liberated myself from there, like this crazy 8-foot, I don't know, prisoner who just like came out of prison screaming at the sky or something. And there was a part of me that didn't want to go back in there. So I didn't know how to realign with my wife from this new perspective. So it took me basically listening to her. And I had to basically let her talk and hear her perspective of what it is that my actions would look like from her side, which I guess it was just too painful to hear it because I was now stepping into this thing, right? But hearing it meant that, and I had my ways of countering it because I could dismantle the things she was saying because I was smarter, right? Learned new tools, right? But with, great power comes great responsibility, or whatever the line is, And it's difficult to discern sometimes between your own intelligence, how you see the world, to somebody else's, and as if somehow you're going to be entrapped in their perspective, and somehow you're going to have to suppress yourself a little bit to make, or compromise to make the other person happy, as if somehow you have to give up something of yourself. And I noticed that within myself, and these are certain things I went through by being smarter and being able to, the sword fight, and I knew how to do it, or a lightsaber, depending on whatever movie we're going to represent us right now. So it felt like there's something with you that's it's exhausting being right for me when I was in that place. I'm not saying that's for you. Whatever it is for you, because it seems like they resonate that there is something you kind of resigned about. There's something there. And if there is, if you want to share, if not, then we can crack on.
I mean, yeah, I'm not sure it's exhausting being right. I'm not sure I am right, and it would probably be great if I was always right, not exhausting. But I think one thing that is exhausting is feeling very passionate about something and feeling very passionate that changes have to happen, and just seeing that they're not anywhere near happening,
What changes?
Well, in what we've been talking about in terms of, social harm and society and prisons and all the rest of it, I think I would love to see a shift from punitive societies that look to individualize social problems, and I'd love to see communities take responsibility for things and be more compassionate and empathetic and supportive and inclusive and all the rest of it. There's a lot of hostility in the world, and I just wish that there was a different way.
Let me just to touch base on that, because right now it seems like you have a perception of the world, which is ultimately your own internal world, that you're projecting as hostile, and that somehow something's disbalanced, when everything is actually in balance. It's just a matter of our perception. So there's something that feels hostile, then the hostility is within yourself. It is that warden prisoner mentality that maybe you're carrying around that is hostile. So there's a hostility of why you wouldn't be able to see it unless it was within yourself. So where does that resonate from? Where does that come from?
I don't know if there is, or if there is, maybe I can't sort of access it, but I feel like there is hostility in the external world that creates tension internally. Look at current affairs right now. Look at, conflict in the Middle East, conflict in Gaza, not even conflict in Gaza, or genocide in Gaza. All of those things that are going on. The hegemony of pharmaceutical companies, the lying, the corruption of extant governments. We can go on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
I think we are living in times that are characterized by levels of inequality that maybe we've not really seen before, and levels of corruption and corrupted power that are just really kind of disturbing. And I think I certainly draw a lot of tension and guilt and shame from all of those things.
Why?
Because as somebody who perceives social harms as collective problems, I'm part of it.
So you feel guilt and shame for the fact that you are not doing something?
Yeah, that. But also that, I'm sure there are things that I do or don't do that actively contribute to, the very problems that I'm kind of
What do you see that you're contributing to this?
I could maybe be more courageous in challenging things. I could at times live a bit closer to my kind of values of compassion, empathy, and all of those things. And just like us all, I'm a flawed human. So maybe I could do more to progress changes in the areas that I would love to see change in. But
well, it seems pretty challenging, like what you put on yourself, because what you're seeing, where your focus goes, energy flows, right? And where you're putting it, because of the system you're in, prison, because of, just your work, generally speaking, puts you in a position where your focus is, it doesn't seem like you need to do it, but I think a part of it is there's a certain payoff we get by looking at the world and going, there's something wrong there. There's crooks, there's this, there's that. There's a certain ego payoff, because then we can sort of get this sort of sense of righteousness. Everybody else in their wrongtiousness. And so then we can then feel there's a part of us that doesn't need to then take responsibility, because then somebody is to blame. And then you realize that we're judging the community for not doing something, because ultimately we're judging ourselves because we are the community. Then ultimately it's ourselves, nothing to do on the outside. We're only seeing the things on the outside because they're the disowned parts we haven't owned within ourselves that we're projecting on others. So if we see there's crooks, or we see there's corruption, where are we corrupt? Where are we the very thing that these people are showing us where we are this thing? Because all of these people have these traits that we all have, but they just show up in a different form based on what it is we value. So we may not value, and they value something else. They'll show up in their form of how they interact with it. And it may look criminal, but within their world and what they're doing, they're just operating from their values. And we may not even recognize when we're actually doing the same, just in a different form. We're not missing anything. In the universe, there's nothing missing. Everything a master lives in a world of transformation. Everybody else lives in the illusion of fear of loss and gain. So if we understand that there is a universal law, and that actually, like genocide and all these things have happened for thousands and thousands of years. Predator, prey, for goodness sake. There's the nature of cycle. There is no... If you look at the victim, then there's the villain. But if you look at the situation from the micro and the macro, everything's playing out in the dynamic, because if you have one, it has to play out the other. So everything is playing out in this duality. So why does that matter? Let's say somebody's listening to it and they want to agree with you that, yeah, the world is this and the world is that, you know, and there are corruption and there is this. How does that serve somebody? Well, it can keep them. Well, tell me, how does it serve somebody to believe in the reality of what you've just described?
Well, to go back, it sounded a little bit there for a moment like you were kind of propagating like a passive response to the world's most severe examples of inhumanity, you know, like with, you know, genocide in Gaza, for example, which maybe we shouldn't get so into, is so appalling in its inevitability and in its ensuing inevitability as a consequence of inaction. You know, we are viewing something happening in real time, and we're all kind of paralyzed to take any kind of action. And I worry that kind of response of looking inward and maybe kind of narrativizing that as, you know, part of human ecology, as you kind of were doing, is just to ignore it. You know, like surely there are times to mobilize and to organize against atrocities, and that's something that I, you know, find very difficult, certainly to do right now. And I don't know how we respond better to things, but
you know,
it's
you, like you just said there, sorry, you mentioned these words, and it's this very smart words that you come out with, the ecology and all these different words. You can tell who's the learned one here. Look, I'm just coming from the perspective, look, we already know, like you said about the prison systems, what works, what doesn't work. We're looking at genocide and war and, you know, mobilizing and treating it as, let's fight a fight with fight. You know, let's go to war. Let's find peace by attacking, whatever it is we think we're going to do. If we're seeking peace, then we're going to attract war. We're seeking like this genocide and whatever's happening right now. We can deem it as whatever we're going to judge it from. From your perspective, as an outsider, we'll say one thing. From the Palestinians, they'll say one thing. From the Israelis, they'll say another thing. So who's right? Morality and this idea
that... not the Israelis.
well, at the end of the day, that's again the judgment. So there's something that you haven't owned in yourself yet. Because if we start pointing fingers at a whole race or society that something's done something wrong, and then we're going, you know, we'll always be pointing fingers at one another, and we're never actually going to evolve humanity's consciousness and actually alleviate ourselves beyond this perpetuated dogmatic view that somehow if we fight fire with fire, we'll get rid of fire. It's sort of madness. It's like a prehistoric way of thinking, it feels like, that we fall into this world of, you know, those people are wrong and these people are right, because who are we to say anything? If these things are happening because there's a divine order here. There was war that happened in Hitler's time, and we could say he was wrong, but the other people...
Divine order.
The divine order in things. So we could see that, you know, he's wrong, or some people say he's right, but we step away and go, okay, what are the benefits of war? Okay, technology advancement, things happen here, things happen there. If we look at it every single moment in our time, we'll see that one thing led to another. Everything counted at each other. There's a balancing act.
Sounds like you're justifying sort of the worst atrocities of history a little bit.
Well, we could do this and go to every single one of war and bring up this hatred and go, you know what, that's wrong. And then this sort of level of indignation comes up as if somehow we're going to abolish all of this by condemning it, which seems counterproductive. The only way we can heal and transcend anything like this is it feels like maybe through love. By actually observing the universal laws in play here, that everything is in equilibrium.
But that's not really gonna, comfort the those in sort of war-torn countries, and it's not going to comfort the incarcerated soul or, the person caught up in, conflict and all the rest of it. I don't know. I struggle with that kind of idea. It feels a bit like philosophical suicide, to suggest that, well, we can just sit back and accept things like divine order and accept that there's some sort of higher kind of power that can, spread love on these situations. I'm not so sure.
I get it, because I can see that from your world, how you view things, there's hostility. So wherever you feel in yourself and you're looking at these injustices, you're going to keep feeling that, and guess what? You're going to keep attracting things in your life that will keep on perpetuating this injustice. You'll see things and there's injustice here, or there might be something here. What is it all leading you towards? To see there is justice.
Yeah, I don't know. I can see that we're going to get sort of locked here, and I don't have any answers. And this is what I was saying, the sort of guilt and shame of knowing that there are immense harms going on and being pretty paralyzed to make a difference is really tough. That's something that I struggle with,
Well, what difference do you think you can make that you yourself are struggling because you feel powerless? Because you're seeing all these things, you see it as a way of it's like it's a condemnation. So it's like whatever I'm seeing out there is inside me. So I'm condemning myself for not doing anything to stop what I feel is wrong in some way.
Yes and no. I mean, I think we're all feeling that struggle, surely, aren't we? We all want to make a difference, and we all want to imagine a world which is a bit more compassionate and kind and sort of progressive, or whatever word you want to use. For example, with your ideas about the new Earth, you're ultimately recognizing that a problem exists. There's a new Earth, there's an old Earth, or there's an old something, a concept of something that, in your view, isn't working or could be better.
I didn't say it's not working. I say everything is. It's not a matter of not working or is working. It's a matter of our perception of what is. So once we shift our perception, and we align to our higher self and not the idiot, as I used to call the Alex, the one who lives in the amygdala, because that's ultimately what's happening. People are reactive. They're holding on to certain beliefs and ideologies that they're right and the other's wrong. And what we're observing now is you're pointing and saying that they're wrong and they're right. So what's the difference? What's different between you and them? So when we pull away from the pointing of who's wrong and right, we can then actually go, if there is the divine order, if I'm willing to see it, because it takes time. But we have to get through all of our preconditioned programs and our past beliefs. And there's a lot of work that one must do to get to that place, to be able to see the synchronicities. Because the universe is giving us something. There's a positive and negative. You can't have one without the other, right? No matter how thin you slice the magnet, there's a positive and negative. There's a moment in your past that you may judge, or that prisoner judges something, or goes back to that moment, that victim does, or whatever it is. When we go back to that moment where we feel like we're challenged, we have a lopsided perception because we're emotional. But when we go back to that moment, we look and do the work, and we actually look at the other side, we realize that when we were challenged, there was also support. And it's just a matter of going back to that moment and actually seeing the divinity in it all.
But we also have to progress a world where there's less suffering. Surely, surely that's the kind of collective call to action, that we have to, be active in imagining and creating a world where there's less suffering.
Well, define suffering.
Not just responding to it by saying, well, this is divine order.
But what do you define suffering?
And that there's a positive and negative. I mean, again, how many children have to die before we actually get involved, rather than say that it's about divine order? How many lives have to be ruined by, corrupt and incompetent political governance before we actually make some changes?
Well, I think it comes down to the vocabulary.
We have to impress ourselves upon societies, the world, communities, in order to kind of force through change, in order to create a society of less suffering, a world of less suffering. So I don't know, I think that you're sort of being overly kind of passive. Again, I've just been writing about Albert Camus' philosophical suicide, and it's this kind of reservation to there being fairly nebulous constructs or things or higher orders out there that can step in to take control of what we can't control as human actors. And I think that's a dangerous idea, because actually we just turn our backs on suffering and on atrocities and inequalities instead
I hear
of
you.
using
But
our,
when you say
our bodies
when you
and our
say
physicality
nebulous,
to do something.
I know, but because you're beating yourself up for the fact that you're doing nothing, rather than sitting there and going, I'm indignated in this process and there's this suffering that I must go through because the world is suffering, rather than actually just accepting for what is, to stop your own suffering that doesn't then permeate to other people, because it's our responsibility to make sure that we govern ourselves. Because hold on, if you step into looking at the outside world and we say, well, we've got to stop the suffering, we've got to stop the suffering. It's this idea that when you say nebulous, like whatever I'm saying, that, and this is not nebulous talk, we can actually put this into practice. So if you're going through a moment of your past, let's look at it. Have you got something in your past that you feel, shame or guilt about?
Oh, we all have.
No, I'm asking you.
Yeah, we all have, and I do.
So if we went back to your moment of shame and guilt, like I've done in myself, not just myself, there's other clients I've worked with, and with Dr. John Demartini, there's many people who have gone through these experiences that would look back at their moment of shame. Now, does it serve us to hold on to that shame?
No, yeah.
To then live in this world that the world is unfair and it's hostile? Or we go back to the moment where we first picked up this belief and go, right, if I look at the other side and actually love and embrace where I shamed myself and others around me, and actually saw the divine order, which you can do, it just takes some time to actually look at it, then you can dispel that and actually align to love and see the gratitude of the fact that nothing was missing. And when you go to that moment and you see it and you appreciate yourself and the other person for whatever their act was, and you see the divine order, then you transcend that illusion and actually see that nothing was missing. When you get to that place, it's not a matter of nebulousness. It's a matter of fact. It's just a matter of our perception. But I get it. I look at the old way of thinking, and I agree with you. When there's that suffering and there is stuff going on around the world, we feel hopeless in some way. But then how does it serve us, to feel hopeless, to say the world is, everyone's suffering, to look at it as hostile, and then walk around here and go, well, I know that's true because I've told myself that's true. How does that really serve anybody around me? Now I'm feeling deflated. I feel hopeless because I feel there's a discrepancy that somehow there's more negative than there is positive in the world, which is not true. It's just a matter of our perception. How does that really serve the people around me? Rather than getting to a place of alignment to see the universal order, because we're taking the time to actually see it, align ourselves to love and actually feel that permeating. If every single person was to go into your viewpoint, do you think they would have peace? Or do you think we'd have war?
Yeah, but there feels something inherently inauthentic about what you're suggesting, which is the kind of deliberate smothering of an innate feeling of anger or shame or guilt. These are
Hold on. Sorry, smothering.
Kind of, yeah.
Why did you hear smothering?
Well, because you're suggesting that we can somehow kind of repress or suppress feelings of anger.
That's not what was said.
And replace them with ideas
Nobody
of love.
Said suppress.
And well, let me finish.
Let me just make sure that we get to the conclusion. When we get back to a moment and actually look at it and heal it, not suppress it. Suppressing is when we don't go back to that moment.
Heal it according to whose perspective?
Your own perspective.
What needs to be healed and who does the healing?
You, yourself, does the healing. Because going back to a moment.
Who says I'm unhealed?
Well, you're carrying around, you said
According
shame.
to who?
Because you just told us. Should we press play and rewind it, ladies and gentlemen?
I I said that we all carry around sort of guilt, shame, and we harbour feelings of, anger or whatever.
So if you go back to a moment that you're harbouring shame, and then you look at that moment and you see the other side and don't see the shame anymore, and you see it as a loving act, how is that suppressing it?
Because it's just convincing myself that it's not there when it actually still is there.
It's not convincing yourself it's not there. You're actually embracing it and seeing the other side, because shame is an illusion to see that there was more negatives than positives to an event that happened in your timeline. But if you go to that place and actually see the positives and you stack them up and you go, oh, there's the divine order, it's no longer there. It's not just some nebulous talk. This is real life. This is something I've done in myself that's actually freed me up from a lot of shame that's going into the book. So I ask you, why are you not willing to go there and release yourself rather than actually suppressing it still?
I don't think I'm suppressing anything.
Evan, can I get some water, please, my friend? Thank you.
Yeah, that's my point. I don't think I am suppressing anything, and I don't really see that there's a great problem with acknowledging fairly natural feelings of shame and guilt and anger. Those feelings can propel us into action that becomes meaningful and guided by our personal values. So I don't necessarily agree that these are states that we need to kind of heal. And I think that the kind of vernacular that you use, healing and divine order, those ideas too are laced with a kind of intentionality, which shame, anger, and all the rest of them are kind of laced with too. To consider something sort of in need of healing and to categorize things as being a consequence of divine order and things like that, that's still a kind of position that you're taking actively to make sense of things.
Hey guys, I just wanted to break this podcast quickly. I'm sure you're enjoying it, and it's going to get even more heated. And the reason for this little interval message is because I'm going through a process at the moment where I'm going through these different methodologies, philosophies, and the universal authors come out recently with Dr. John DeMartini. And I like to lead with my heart. I put my heart on my sleeve and I jump fully in. And then I assess what this methodology is like with people around me. And I have to say, it's taken me on quite a journey. In fact, as you're listening to this, as I record this, I'm actually about to head off to India for Vipassana, which is a 10-day silent retreat. Because since watching these recordings and since me going through this sort of journey, I think it's time to just sit, reflect, and contemplate quite literally my life choices, so that I can come back even cleaner, as a cleaner vessel, and be able to hear people even more so. And this is the power where it lies. It's the listening. And I've been enjoying that. But the more I talk, even this particular podcast has been challenging for me to watch. So leaving you with that, enjoy the rest of the podcast. See you soon. Much love.
Let's say, from how you view life, if it's going to make you more of a fulfilled person, then if I walk away from this conversation of what I feel, what I'm aligned to, because when you step back and you see the synchronicities of everything that's happening and you see the wisdom of it, something comes to you. You can see it as good or bad, right? Because I feel like you live in the realm of good and bad, rather than actually seeing, rather than seeing things like when something's received and it's like, okay, and it's very difficult not to be emotional when something comes your way, right? Because I'm feeling myself like something's coming up for me, because it's like, and I really appreciate this, man. I really do, and I love you for this, right? Because this is awesome.
It was always going to be
because I know that you're a psychologist, and the whole ethos of what you do is ultimately to help people understand a certain narrative they talk to themselves and to untangle them, right? I mean, I thought you were in the same gig as I was, but from what I'm hearing, it seems like, no, if we go there and address it, that would be suppressing it. And I'm like, my man, going back to a moment in time with your own timeline, like I have done myself and liberated myself of a lot of guilt and shame, I can tell you that, and it's going in the book. And I'm showing a process of how, and even showing the divine order of what's actually playing here, because people just don't believe it. And I'm like, mate, it's not even trying to convince you, dude. From the journey I've been on since a year ago, from what's unfolded, oh my goodness, it's like, I used to be hard on myself with all the events that were going on around us, because at the end of the day, there's something about feeling powerless, and then I can sort of beat myself up or, connect to this place of sadness or pain within myself because it's familiar. It's like a friend that I've always known.
Sure.
But to what degree? Thank you so much. You know, but when I suddenly saw the order of things, when I went back into the timelines, like recently, I just did a chat with a coach of mine, a friend who we're going to a wedding. I'll say an example. I'm sitting on the couch, right? Yesterday. I've even got the picture. And I said, I want to do some work. And I said, it was around my older brother, funny enough, who went to prison. He was the strongest man in Brixton prison. You know, he was a man, right? Mm-hmm. Man. And I didn't feel like the man. He was 6 years old, and he gave me a hard time growing up. But I didn't feel like I could be a man around somebody who was like the alpha. I mean, he was in prison, and he treated the people, the other prisoners, like they were like his younger brothers, picking on them, like messing around with them kind of thing. I mean, this is a dude that you just don't mess around with, right? And then he was, you know, with the women and all that kind of stuff. So I put him on a pedestal, which means I had to put myself in the pits, because you can't have one without the other, right? Okay, this is the seesaw effect. Yeah. So she said to me, okay, well, you see him as a man because he was showing it in his form, physicality, right? Brute strength. Where you put him on a pedestal, where were you doing the same thing? But you felt proud about, but really you're suppressing your shame because you can't have one without the other, right? So I said, okay. And I look back at a moment when I was running mischief clubs with my friends. We were doing the whole mischief thing in London. And anytime there was a situation, they would say, get Alex. And then suddenly I would jump over a couch or I'd jump over something. I'd be straight up in front of them to whatever group of people. It didn't matter how big or small they were, but I'd be like, all right, guys, you know, the crazy eyes come on. And then I'd be there. But I suppressed that to think that somehow because I didn't get into a fight, that I wasn't really as strong, as manly as he was. But actually discounting the fact that maybe I felt shame in the event because actually I was shitting myself, but I overcompensated with this kind of crazy guy. But my form that I didn't value as much as, say, the physical of how he was showing it in his form was through talking. I was able to de-escalate situations with how I spoke. I would able to, but it didn't mean I was any less of a man because he was doing it in his form. I just had to see the form out how I was showing up in. And the more I did that in the moments that I had pride or shame in, I balanced it out. Because there's a moment in time of a perception I had that had me disbalanced. So here's a perspective, and then there's another perspective, and all these different perspectives came up. And when I say I owned it, and I didn't have my brother on a pedestal anymore, in that moment, a shift happened where my two dogs, we've got 4 dogs, Cookie and Pip, 2 female dogs, came up next to me in that moment. And she said, what are those dogs symbolizing? Because this universe has these sort of things that just happen. And they were suddenly lying on me, and they were acting. I said, "What?" My eyes were like, "Oh, they're my bitches, obviously," because I sort of lied to the man, you know, that I obviously put myself down. And the universe sort of showed its way. And then she goes, "Well, if he has his strength, so, you know, where's his weaknesses?" Because I just couldn't imagine him being weak, because he was a strong guy. No one, didn't matter who it was, he was gonna, you know, he would wind people up, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. And then we noticed these weaknesses. Our little puppy, a poodle came next to me, who's a bit like simple and, you know, cute, was then getting my attention in that moment. So I was seeing these synchronicities, and she was witnessing it, because for her, this happens all the time. Once you start to see the energetic shift of things, you can't have one without the other, and then we get these feedback. It's a matter of seeing it, but it is happening all around us. So we're watching this sort of this dance of energies that were happening, and there was a confirmation that there was a shift in energy. And pets are usually the things that you can feel straight away. So I say it in not just some nebulous manner, because I'm learning from this doctor.
An issue with that word.
Yeah, because Dr. John D. Martini uses that. He used that word recently. This is probably one of the smartest men you'll ever encounter, and he talks about the spiritual connection. He's read pretty much every book there is on the bloody planet for the last 50 years, and I'm listening to his prophecy experience. I would suggest you listen to it. It's like 100 hours of this guy who goes through. I mean, he's trained over like 1 million people and taken them through this breakthrough experience where they can come to this place where they can actually be opposite their father who's been dead for 20 years or mother for 50, whatever. Because when you collapse time and space and you're in your heart and you're in your love, then that person, you're with that person, because it changes form. It's just a matter of our perception, because we would believe that somehow if somebody dies that they're gone. But in fact, like birth, the many become the one, the traits. And when you die, the one becomes the many. They disperse. So when we think we've lost somebody, they show up in a different form around us. As it said even in the Bible, when Jesus left, his form, he didn't even mention it, that the change of form. I was like, that's quite interesting, because that spirit, then people were able to see him in different forms. They just couldn't see that the form had changed. I'm not saying that let's use that as the evidence of things, obviously, but what I'm saying is it's been in biblical times. I'm reading Marcus Aurelius. There's this similarity, but when it comes to actually witnessing it in my own experience, because I can only share from my own experience, I've seen it. It's not a matter of theory, you know, and that's why it's putting it in the book, because I feel like we need to dispel this illusion that it's not the case.
Yeah. To go back to what you started that extract with about healing and about
Love heals all, dude.
yeah, right.
You don't quite believe
sure.
that yet. You know what? You know, how would you know unless you felt it? Let me ask you this: what is restricting you from getting to that place of love?
I am at a place of love.
Who are you trying to convince?
Yeah, I mean, well, you're again, in my view, colonizing my experience of these constructs, right? You're bringing me into your normative terms, right? You're interpreting my interpretation of reality and bringing it into your framework of understanding, and as a consequence, altering my experience, right? But trust me, like, I'm being authentic. I'm concealing nothing from you. Now, so going back to this issue of healing, you know, construable negative emotions, right? So let's call guilt, shame, and anger a sort of negative emotion that is causing problems in someone's life, that is showing up in discontentment or, you know, whatever. Well, my problem with the idea of healing is not that we shouldn't want to heal deleterious states. And you made a comment about me kind of being a psychologist. Surely I want to help people do that. Otherwise, you're just an irresponsible psychologist who's not really helping people at all, right? You didn't say that, but that's the implication. And but sure, you know, we do want to support people to overcome negative states and feelings and emotions. But first, we have to be willing to accept them. And ideas and ideologies of healing have the tendency to frame guilt, anger, resentment, whatever, as bad and negative states. And when we do that, we actually reduce the individual's ability to sit with them because they're bad. Don't feel guilty, don't feel anger. And that's what I meant by repression and suppression. There is an inbuilt assumption in ideas of healing that something has to stop, and that there is a bad state and a sort of good, better, more functional state. And so the idea of healing anger, for me, is potentially problematic.
Who said healing anger?
And maybe dangerous. Well, I'm saying it.
Okay.
Because we were
no one
talking
mentioned
about healing.
healing and emotion. Nobody mentioned healing and emotion. It was
Okay,
going back to a moment
Okay.
in our time, our life.
But
So let's just hold on.
But let me finish.
But I
this.
just want to make sure, because you're going to talk about healing of an emotion. Emotion, if we express one emotion, we're suppressing another.
Well, you were talking about kind of fixing hostility and shame. You were kind of talking in those terms of like getting over that. You kind of used me as an example of someone who might kind of sit with hostility and wanting to overcome that, right?
Not the hostility,
Right.
because you mentioned shame and guilt. And I said, okay,
Yeah.
go back to a time when you felt shame and guilt. And you said everybody feels shame and guilt. Rather than, because you could have just used this moment as an example. Go, show me an event that you had in your life that you're holding. And we could actually practice it right now.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of what I'm getting at. So in acceptance and commitment therapy, which I've grown to really kind of love and appreciate, the acceptance part is about making space for discomfort, making space for uncertainty, and making space for emotions, thoughts, and feelings, which might not be serving us very well in terms of our mental health, but they are there. You know, so somebody who's really kind of wrestling with ideas of low self-worth, for example, and telling themselves, I'm not a good person, or I'm not doing enough, or whatever, in ACT and in other therapeutic modalities that elevate ideas of acceptance The idea is to kind of sit with that. Okay, what does that feel like? Is that working for me? Is it true? Is it kind? Is it compassionate? Where did this first kind of show up for me? And allowing space for discomfort and those kind of difficult emotions tends to then allow the person to actively and consciously commit to a different kind of course of action, which is, okay, now every time I get that feeling of I'm not doing enough, I'm going to sit with that. Okay, I'm not doing enough. You're not good enough. You should be better. You should be doing this. Okay, right. Is that true? Well, you know what? It actually might be true that, I'm not doing enough. It certainly feels true. Okay. Is it kind? No, it's not kind. Is it compassionate? No. If it's not kind, it's not compassionate. Is it working for you? No, it's not working for me. Okay, well, why does it keep showing up for you? Well, because I really value vitality and I value equality. Those are my values. Ah, right. So your values are being crossed by your experience of this particular thing. Yes. What could you do then instead? It's more adaptive. I could do something that is in line with my values. Instead of telling myself this bad thing all the time and these negative states and focusing on them, I could actually just do something very small today that is in line with those values of equality and compassion. I'm going to go and volunteer for a couple of hours at a call center dealing with, mental health. I'm going to go and speak to Alex in New Earth and listen and spend some time and commit to a podcast which is about these issues. I'm going to, just for today, write a few words about how I feel about this. And bit by bit, I can take that feeling of anger, shame, and all the rest of it, and I can utilize its energy to align myself with very important values and drivers that bring me towards the person I intended to be, that rescue my intended self. And for me, that's why ideas of healing are a little problematic, but ideas of using every kind of thought, emotion, to accept elements of self and move towards value alignment is a wonderful approach to doing things. Might be a very similar approach to what you do, probably is. We always seem to congeal in this manner.
I think what's happened is, I'm not sure, it's not saving face or anything, but it's like what you just said is another form of saying healing.
Sure.
But
I am a stickler for semantics and language.
Because you're saying like, but there's something about healing, and then you go in to say something about what ultimately is a process of healing. Because if you're feeling this way, that you're hard on yourself, and that you have been at the beginning of this podcast because of things that are going on out of your control, that you feel, then you'd have this conversation. Basically, oh, Christian, there's situations out of your control and it's making you feel what? Yeah, I'm feeling this well. What can you do right now to help yourself through that situation? Well, if I looked at things in a different way, then I could not feel. So you can have that conversation, absolutely. But if every single life event happening outside yourself, all you'd be doing is having this conversation. And how about, and I'm a stickler for saving time. I don't know about you. I'd rather get to the root cause of things and go, rather than every single situation that I feel like I need to attract in my life to then have this conversation, how about I just go back to the root cause of it all? And
but that assumes there is one.
But because absolute there is. Because we go back to our moments where we feel shame and guilt, like you said, everybody's carrying. Well, not everybody is carrying it. Because when you do the work and you go back to the moments where you feel like you are carrying that bag, the heavy rocks of guilt and shame and all the other stuff, and you start to actually learn to take the rocks out one at a time, the bag gets lighter. And then you become lighter. And then you're able to move more. I'm only speaking from my own experience. I'm not just saying this, from a place of theory and, one day though I'll get rid of those rocks, you know what I mean? I'm saying it of, well, this is a practice, and I'm talking it right now that this is actually possible. I'm talking about, I've had people sit here who have literally been carrying those rocks, who people will watch it and go, oh, there was a moment when he helped that person have a breakthrough because they were willing. Not like it felt like you're doing, ching, ching, using every word there is, Mr. Nebulous, and doing whatever you can to stay where you are. Rather than having this moment of healing where you can actually lift that bag off yourself. But because you're so smart, it feels like I'd rather come across in a way that in one way, like a persona, but I'm going to carry on holding what it is I'm harboring within myself.
Or maybe you want to construe me as somebody holding a bunch of rocks because it allows you to be some kind of healer, which is important to you. So I become a kind of vehicle for your sense of importance, and thus a kind of object of your egocentricity.
Ah, so you see what you see in me is what you see in yourself, my friend.
I'm being. I don't even mean that, but I just thought.
My man, it doesn't hurt me because look, at the end.
I know.
My man, it doesn't hurt me because I know that
down.
this is like a reactive state. Look, whatever you see, I'm telling you, like whatever I'm saying about you, I see it in myself. You are just a mirror of me, my friend. So I have to take that responsibility and own that. Where am I doing what you're doing? So if you see something in me that's happening, well, you're the psychologist and you go into prisons. I'm sure you do the same thing. But at the end of the day, who is it to judge? My point is we need to own this within ourselves. You know, it's not about like coming on here to heal or not heal. You know what? Whatever needs to come out on this conversation, like other people come on, we just have a chat about whatever it needs to be chatted about.
Yeah, but I promise I was just being facetious there, honestly, and I am really kind of open to kind of introspection. You know, I think that you have this idea of me as kind of using linguistics or whatever as a shield, you know, and as a protective mechanism. But I don't feel like I'm doing that. I am really quite open to sort of introspection, and
I can see that.
I'm actually about to engage in therapy. I've booked 10 sessions of psychotherapy. It's the first time in my life that I'll be doing therapy, which may well kind of support your thesis about me. But you know, I'm quite willing to sort of reflect on myself. And
beautiful.
And I agree with a lot of what you're saying. But I just really love that discussion about healing. That's why I kind of focus in on it. Not because I'm trying to, you know, create a bit of attention here, but I love the I love the debate about healing versus agility and adaptiveness and flexibility. For me, I love the idea of becoming psychologically flexible. And I think that's it's the best way I've found. It's not ideal and perfect. It's the best way I've found to frame my understanding, at least, of what should be strived for in terms of mental health. And again, I am getting caught in semantics, but healing prescribes a kind of being healed moment. One goes through healing and then they arrive at being healed, which is it discerns a movement, a transformation has occurred there. Whereas with psychological flexibility and agility, there is no arrival. There is only the experience of our emotions, thoughts and feelings. There is only a communication with them. When you spoke about kind of we could forever be in that communication and that narrative, yes, and I am in it. And in a way, I think that's something that we should promote, you know, this constant narrativization and conversation with ourselves about our conscious experience. For me, that in and of itself is, whatever you want to call it, being in a state of healing, being happy, whatever. But, you know, that's, for me, a really important, I don't want to say the word goal, but screw it, you know, a goal to be achieved.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Look, to go under this and what we've been sort of like back and forth with, and, you know, a little projection on one another, and, you know, there's a battle or something. And I think, you know, what comes to the forefront of this whole experience is everybody has their own perspective of their reality, you know, and at the end of the day, what is it that we want to gain from our own perception of events? Now, if I see somebody struggling and they're feeling, you know, out of control and helpless in some way, I feel in my nature in that moment to want to alleviate them for whatever reason, to just shift a little bit of a perspective and just see that the divine order in things and go, not to have a passive outlook on life, but to align, rather to be empowered. Because when you feel helpless, how the fuck can you help? But when you align to love and you go, wow, the expansive divinity of all is all evasive and it's all around us. It's like, what is going, it's incredible. And then suddenly from that place, I'm not then going home and just lying on the couch going, well, there you go then. You know, morning to night, writing, putting these things into practice, jumping on a podcast, running businesses. There's no passive look here. It's bringing on people's perspectives that I want to challenge. I'm a guy challenge. If I don't challenge you, challenge leads to growth. Support leads to entropy. So you need that fine balance, right? Because one too much of the other, it's going to, create this sort of. So we're growing right now, and as much as it might feel uncomfortable, this is how we do it, and this is what psychotherapy is going to give you. I've gone through psychotherapy. I've gone through every other therapy modality there possibly is, and I still go through it because there's certain. It's not just my matter; it's my wife, and then you've got kids, and it's a matter of always just checking in and fine tuning. But I've done so much of it. But I've also been the speaker and coach, and when I'm the speaker and coach, I'm on stage. It's everybody else, and there's me. I can control and dictate the reality. Nobody can come close to me. So I can stay in this illusion that somehow I'm superior. So if I was a psychologist, let's say, and there was other people, if I'm teaching it, I'm going to feel that way. I'm not saying that that's what you feel, but I know if I didn't get support and help me shift it, like a coach or therapist, I'm going to be in this place because I haven't actually had the freedom to actually deconstruct and go, who am I actually? It's like Ram Dass, I told you before in his book of Remember Here and Now or something. He was in Harvard, he was this, psychologist until he realized that the confines of the mind and psychology, he just stepped out of that world completely because he was entrapped with the whole, I'm this, I'm the lecturer, I'm the car, and I've got this. And he realized that he was sort of in prison. And it's just the familiarity of what I saw in that regard. And at the end of the day, you don't have to take whatever I have to say. It's just a matter of nobody's got hurt. It's just words, in a sense that we're just sharing different perspectives. And I love love, right? I love the feeling of that. And I love that there is a divine order and that everything is actually orchestrated to lead us into love, to lead us into equilibrium. It's just a matter of seeing it because I couldn't see it before and I struggled. I felt helpless. I felt all of these things.
Sure.
I did. Suicidal, escaping with drugs and booze, gambling, pretty much mischief ways,
Yeah.
So I've gone from one extreme to the other. And with the different modalities and practices, I'm learning, and with clients that I've had before, I'm now bringing people on here. There is a certain, when you see it, when I see it now, it brings a tear to my eye, the gratitude I have. And I know there's things going on outside because we're told that's happening, and there's from news that there's something going on, and somehow then we live in the illusion that, life is good and death is bad. That what do we know is good and bad? And maybe death is not bad. But somebody's dead, then suddenly that's a bad thing. Again, it's a morality thing that we project on, Again, it's out of our control. It's a matter of our own perception. Why have a perception that will initiate those certain feelings where we feel the way we do, that we feel we don't have the energy to access to be able to make any real difference in the world. So it's just a matter of tweaking and just freeing ourselves of that burden so that we can be our best selves and not feel depressed or compressed because of events that are out of our control. That's all.
Do you feel like you're your best self?
I'm becoming my best self every day.
Okay. Do you think you'll ever get there?
Do I think I ever get to my best self? Every single day that I do this work and have these conversations and in the books and the things I'm doing, every day I'm just accessing this divine intelligence that's all around us, and I just keep witnessing it. And if I'm living in a state of gratitude every minute, then I am my best self.
Do you have a feared self, do you think? What do you fear becoming? Do you have any fears about
not fears
what you could be drawn towards, which would take you away from your best self or desired self?
I've already been there, my man. That would become what I've described as the idiot self, as the Greeks used to call it, the one who's the seat of the amygdala, when you are reactive and you're living in your lowest values and you're injecting everybody else's values and you're unsure of yourself and you're insecure and you feel that you have no control. yes, I've been there, and those fears of abandonment and everything that was my journey. Some little triggers happen, but it's not being emotional and letting it completely take over me and going, there it is. I'm observing it. It's not me, but I understand where it stems from. And then the higher self kicks in because it's not emotional. It's reasonable. It's ultimately seeing the balance of things.
Would you say that your best and desired self is the kind of polar opposite of your feared self?
No, because you're looking at love. There's no opposite of. Love is just love, right? When you're in gratitude, it's seeing both sides simultaneously and synchronizing them, right? Within. If I'm in fear, the fear is because I'm having an illusion about some event that's an imagined event that doesn't exist. So a fear of losing my wife, you know? If I have the fear of losing my wife, then I have to ask myself, why do I have that fear? What's this fear of abandonment? There's a book called Attached, and we just started reading it. And there's 3 types, they say, of people in relationships. You've got the anxious type. You've got the ones that are withdraw, like what they call it, the like withdrawing, basically. And then you have the secure type. So it's understanding. I was more of the anxious type. I had this, you know. So these certain fears, but it's just recognizing that they're not real.
So the best self, then, the desired self, it's fair to say, is in some way running counter to a discernible feared self. And a discernible, if there's a best self, there must be a worst self, right?
Well, because you coined the word best, let's just say the higher self is the one that recognizes, say, the divine order and sees events as it comes, neither is good nor bad, just is, and is able to synthesize and synchronize simultaneously rather than judging it. Great. Oh, no. Later. Or, oh, yeah. And going through this emotional roller coaster of how life is given to them. Being like the victim of going, life is happening, you know, it's to me rather than for me. But when you get into that place of, it's happening, it's all for me, and there's nothing actually I need to do. Actually, I just need to get out of the way. That's when you realize that everything's already happening. Sure. Once you step out of the way completely, because I notice when I'm in the way of things, I mess things up. The less I'm in the way, less I'm emotional, and I just let things just happen. Things just seem to go so much more smoothly.
I'm trying to understand a bit more about this. So if there's a higher self, sorry, I'm like a dog with a bone, but if there's a higher self, is there a lower self?
Yes.
Okay, right. And presumably for you and for each individual, there are words, adjectives that we could use to describe the lower self.
Yeah, it's called the idiot.
Right, okay, the idiot self. So is it fair to say then, if the journey towards best or higher self is one that you partake in every day, right? Because you said that you kind of do it every day through reading, divine intelligence, whatever. Is it fair to say that you're always on a journey of discovery towards that higher self? And if there is a lower self, you're moving away from a lower self. You are on a journey towards a higher self, and as a consequence, because that's kind of a dichotomy, you're moving away from a lower self.
Well, it's like a transcendence.
Right.
And you know what can be the fear is, let's say, when one is in the higher self and you start to expand and you get with this momentum, you suddenly realize that you're in the stratosphere and that your lower self seems to be way, way down into the earth. And you go, whoa, what if I fall from this height? That's when it gets scary. Because you suddenly realize the magnitude of how big you are. It can get quite... the expansiveness of actually who we are. No wonder we'd rather stay in when I was before the idiot, because it feels like you're kind of just on the ground, and when you fall, it's not as hard. But when you feel like you're in this place, there's that sense of don't look down for a moment.
Yeah.
But again, this is not something that would deter me to go backwards, but it does also show me of how far I've come. That's all. It's a matter of being able to discern perspective-wise. Once you're up in that mountain, you look down and go, wow, I've climbed a long way. But it's that fear of going, but am I really as big as I am? Because am I really that small?
Yeah, so there's a great deal of utility then, isn't there, in lower self, because lower self awakens us and projects us towards a discernible, higher force or a higher self. So all of the adjectives that we might ascribe to the lower self, whether that be fear, anger, hedonic sort of pursuits, all of those ideas, they're actually fundamental to ideas of growth. But this also means that we're always on a journey. We never really stop. We're always transitioning, and therefore probably oscillating between higher self, lower self, always. Which for me points to the essential utility of, all of those things that we started off discussing: anger, fear, shame, guilt. They exist. They're there. They're part of this experience of lower self. And we mustn't forget that, and nor should we pretend that it kind of is ever healed. We carry it with us always, and we use it as a way to check in with ourselves and where we are on this journey towards, as you call it, transcendence.
Yeah, well, nobody's saying to get rid of something. It's, as we go on this journey of transcendence, it's not to see it as something that we need to get rid of, because that means we're judging it good or bad. It's just accepting that this is within our human experience, that everything that's carried within our genome over 4 billion years is stored there, all this information. And we maybe think it's just our own amygdala that we're reacting from our own trauma, but it may be passed down from our own parents. In fact, when we're under stress, we regress and we go back to a time that, from dinosaur times or, mammoth time, whatever it is, because that's within us. So there's a lot that we are going through that we are transcending, because, our purpose before was survival. So now we're coming out of this place that we don't need to survive so much, depending on where you are in the world, right? That we're stepping into. So if you're not surviving, then it's like, what is our purpose then? Like, if I'm not surviving anymore, like the clouds of, there's a stillness. Whoa, let me go back to the drama. Let me create drama again, because I'm not sure what this is without the survival. Because it's quite new for us to be in this state. It's new, because before we've always had wars and it's still happening, but we're coming to a place of being comfortable, and that over comfort, over support can lead to entropy, and then we feel like we're degrading in some way. That somehow the survival mechanism, when it kicked in, at least we were growing, but then if you don't feel like you don't have a purpose that's bigger than you and you're comfortable, it feels like death. People get suicidal because they go, what is the point? So it's recognizing that what are we actually here for, if it's not out of survival and we're just coming out of that place, that we're actually going, right, okay, my mind's looking for something to survive in. I don't need to anymore. Let me look at that war over there instead. Let me look over here instead. Because we're looking for that meaning still. Yeah. When rather like the new earth is about a purpose big enough to transcend, consciousness of humanity, to align to love and see that there is a duality in play and how we can step out of that. Because what happens, the system and most people are in this sort of illusion that they can separate pleasure from pain, which you can't do. That's why we get addicted to things, because we think we can have the pleasure, and I've been there, without getting the pain. But that's an illusion. When you see that you can't have one without the other, you can see it's a bloody game that everybody's within, and they don't even see they're in it. So this is all about a platform to help people see that there is actually a universal law that we all have in common. 8 billion of us are actually going through this simultaneously. There's a higher divine hand here, and you can't escape it. So let's just be aware of it and go, there we are. Let's get out of this game now and go, okay, whew. And I recognize myself that when I was a bit emotional with our conversation, and I might have said some things that reminiscence of my older brother might have said it to me, and I recognize that. And if I said something about you not being in love, in a loving place, I want you to know that maybe I wasn't in that moment because I was emotional and I felt like I was challenged. And again, I actually appreciate this whole experience because it helps me grow. And, and I love that. That's what I'm inviting. You're somebody I recognize in myself. You're, this is, that's it. I recognize you, right? And you're on your journey as I'm on mine, and I'm in this place, and I feel grateful for being in this place. And I'm not looking at the world in the way that you do, but it's never wrong or right. I'm just grateful I'm not, because I have been there, but it doesn't mean that where you are is also not the way you need to be. Like, you know, it's just, that's a matter of perception. You are where you need to be, because in the world you're in right now, you're able to support and assist the community and the people around you, because you need to have this sort of thinking that you need to have right now. Like, you need to have what it is you're going through. And we needed to have this conversation, whatever came out of it. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened. Because there's nothing to change. Everything's just perfect in the way it is. Otherwise, it just wouldn't be. And who are we to say there's something wrong or right? Oh, my God, somebody could watching this. You got challenged. You shouldn't have said that. But not knowing, actually, if I just supported you in your story, let's say, people go, oh, Alex is very empathetic. He's such a nice guy. But really, what's going on? Your cells are going into entropy. But rather than challenging it, people don't like that. But actually, you're growing.
Yeah, sure.
You're getting stronger. So do you see what I mean? Like, it's a matter of people will support you and they will challenge you. They're going to support me and they will challenge me, you know, based on our conversation. Like, if you look at comments on Facebook, you'll see some people going, oh, that was really good. Oh, what was that about? I'm sure it's like 50-50. You know what I mean? On every single thing, because one thing's going to balance out the other. You see it all the time. You can't have one without the other. So when we just pull ourselves away from that, then it's just going, oh, you know, there's nothing I need to do anymore. Everything's already in balance. It's just a matter of seeing that within my own life experience, my own human experience, that then I can at least transcend other people's experience of taking that burden off them and say, everything's in divine order. As much as we see things that are happening.
Hitting the mic, sorry.
That's all right. As much as we see it, you know, life around us, and, you know, we can define it as bad or good. Then we're just playing, you know, we're just playing the same game as everybody else. And it just feels like now's the time to pull ourselves out of that, you know, illusion.
Yeah, okay. Do you have any, sometimes my questions might sound like I'm trying to sort of catch you out. I'm not doing.
Please do. Try to catch me out.
Well, no, I'm genuinely.
Catch me if you can.
I'm genuinely curious of whether or not you have any practical, physical solutions to the suffering that exists in the world. What can we do to make the world more compassionate, nicer, kinder?
Well, when we look at the view that it needs those things, that means there's already a judgment that there's not already the other side of it. Because where your focus is going is there's a lack, when there isn't actually lack. But when your focus goes into lack, it's going, oh, okay, where am I? Why do I see lack? So whatever in myself I'm seeing, or I'm suppressing, or I'm not expressing, or whatever it is, because it's not, it's your perception, it's your reality. I mean, well, at the end of the day, it's coming from your. You see what I'm saying? So somebody else can say it's abundance. There's so much. But look at it, everything, and then one person go, "Oh my God, look! You know, there's nothing here, and it's all just chaos."
So then, should we be happy with how things are?
But when you use the word "should," it's like an external force. You tell me, can you be?
You know, should we leave it there, like in terms of, you know, the development of our societies and communities? That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Are we good?
Are we good? Well, then again, it's a judgment of saying if we're good, then we're bad as well.
No, I'm just asking what the purpose of, you know, this perspective is of, you know, maybe the new earth, or maybe ideas of making sort of progress in a way that means we can envision a more compassionate and inclusive society. Or are we kind of saying, no, I mean, we perceive abundance out there and love everywhere, so we're good, you know, it's fine. Just perceive everything as kind of good and focus on love. And
I never used the word good, because when we start using words like good, you can't have good without the bad. You can't have peace without the war. You're inviting duality in, and it's a perception again that we're seeing more negative than positive, or more positive than negative, when things are just are. They just is. They just are. That's just it. Now, we can label it, we can say it, and then, you know, create an industry out of what we've just labeled, and then, you know, make money off it and everything else. That's what people do, right? Yeah. So when we step out of that game completely of duality and looking at needing to, say, change anything, because who are we to think that we're the responsible ones, let's say, to think that we're the ones that need to do anything, when let's say that, like, cause and effect. Oh, I'm going to go in and, you know, I want peace. We're going to fight for peace, attack on terrorism, and all these kind of terminologies. And yeah, let's do it. And then whatever action is going to have a cause and effect, right? Every action has a reaction. So there we are going forward, we want peace. And then we attract war. And then it becomes this whole thing, right? So it depends on our intention. And once we understand that, okay, if I look within myself, is there a battle? Is there something within myself? Am I on a side? Because if I feel there's a side I'm on within myself, I'm going to have to attract the other side to balance me out. Because whatever we seek will always attract the opposite. So if I'm just seeking peace, then I need to attract war to balance me out. So when we step out of that completely, this is why I'm saying take the charge out. Because everybody out there is charged up. That's wrong, Israel this, or Palestine that. We just add to the collective consciousness of the charge that there's some wrong or right going on. And then it creates this sort of...
But does that mean there are no wrongs?
Well, again, it's when you go into the place of there's something wrong, somebody else will see it as right. It's all the matter of perspective.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, you know, if people in prison, they would say everybody's wrong, right? Would you say they're wrong?
People in prison?
Yeah.
They've committed acts that maybe are wrong.
Okay, so there's a judgment of seeing something that they've done is wrong.
There is a judgment of seeing something is wrong, but I would say that for the majority of people in prison, they have done an act which has caused harm.
Okay. So if you see it as wrong, how can you then look to perpetuate a new system in place that would liberate them from being judged as wrong, that incarcerates them? If you want to be seen as, hey, community, come to it, it's all our responsibility. How can you do that if you see them as wrong? You're the one who wrote the book.
Well, one thing that we can do is commit to things like reintegration rituals, where if somebody has to serve time because they've become unsafe to be in the community, then once they've done that, once they've gone through the very ceremonious punishment that we tend to kind of focus on in, you know, most societies, then we should allow for true, authentic reintegration of that individual. We should be willing to accept them back, I guess. And so that might involve anything from acknowledging people's achievements through certification, through rewarding generative work that individuals do to kind of prove to themselves and others that they've changed for the better. But I think there certainly needs to be a response. I'm not kind of condoning sort of a strange kind of nihilism. I think there needs to be a response, but perhaps it needs to be, again, a community-based response where individuals who were harmed in a certain context have a say in what happens next, you know?
You know what, I absolutely agree with you, man. Look, let's say you ask me, like, okay, what would you change and everything else? And I'm just, this is something that I'm sort of absorbing and I'm growing with, right? Confidence, let's say, of seeing things a little bit differently. The way that you're seeing it differently, that you want to see this transformation take place because you feel like it needs to, because the numbers don't lie, right? It's just not working, as you know, well, not say working for the community because they keep reoffending. So as we look at this as a community matter, if there's a criminal, that means there's a victim, right? Now, for the sake of the community, let's say we bring the criminal, one criminal, and there's the victim of that crime. And as a community, we say we made a circle around them. And we just said, okay, there's that criminal. What he did was wrong. And there you are, you're the victim. So let's keep you in that state, but let's move forward, and he's not going to reoffend. So there he is carrying shame because he did something wrong, and everybody wants to say, you did something wrong. I know what it myself is. I know myself. When I feel like I've done something wrong or I feel shamed, I seem to attract more of it in my life because like a magnet, right?
We tend to see that in the evidence as well. You know?
So let's say then, as a community, because we want to take action together, that instead of keeping the illusion that somebody's a victim and somebody's the villain, that we actually go, okay, Mr. Criminal, Mrs. Victim, let's say, what if we look at your situation? You're the victim, but let's see how it served you. Okay, so this happened. Like, for example, there's a story about this guy who got kidnapped and he got put in the back of a car. And for him, it was an ordeal. But because there's always balance, what he actually, when he was in this dark time, he didn't know if he was going to make it or not. He was having homeostasis situation was kicking in, and he was having this like gladiator moment of walking to the fields, with his family and having a blissful moment to counteract his fear, because you can't have one without the other. And so he came out of the ordeal and he survived and everything else. But he was traumatized because he saw one side of the event as if it was all challenging, but actually he forgot the beautiful moment of connecting with his family. And at that time, the man was going through a divorce, potentially going to lose his family. But that moment, he could have been a victim. Instead, helped save his marriage, brought his family together, and he had to pay money because he was a hostage, and he had to pay money to get out of it. And so when asked, this is Dr. John DeMartini, I'm just sharing his story. When asked, now you see it from that side, would you have paid the hostages to take you so you got everything you have now? He went, yes, now I would have, because I see the divine order of it, the fact there was nothing missing. So if we go to that circle and that community and go, okay, Mrs. Victim, how did it serve you? Why did you attract that into your life, and what did it give you afterwards? Well, if it gave me this, and this, then I'm not a victim anymore, because there's nothing missing. In fact, everything was always in equilibrium. But it's my perceived event of being a victim is what led me down the path of being a victim. Because usually it's the community that perpetuates the story that they're a victim. I don't know I'm a victim until somebody says, I lost my mum.
Yeah, I'd say it's not the community, it's probably the institutions that respond to...
But the point is, it's like the responsibility on the community. If you're looking at the criminal as wrong, you yourself... But if you want to bring him back into the community and go, let's look at it and go, you think you've done something wrong, but where do we see the other side of it? And how did it actually serve the community? Then they can take that burden of shame off themselves and go, there was it. I feel actually grateful, rather than carrying this stigma that I can't ever fit into society because I'm wrong in some way. And then it opens up for the space of love. But that actually ultimately transcends it all. And obviously the institutions, look, I was acting as a prisoner and for like a year in one of these institutions, and I was training wardens. So I've been there, I've been acting as a prisoner. I know what it kind of felt like, even if I was just acting it, that they're not an easy institution. These people, they're playing a role. They're playing out the warden because they're mirroring out what they're probably suppressing in themselves.
Sure.
The criminal, because they feel pride, and while the criminals feel shame. So there's this proud wardens going around, and there's this, shameful, and then suddenly, it balances out and things like that, Everybody's just, when you look at the energetic viewpoint of things and how everybody's just different shapes and forms of this energetic divine order that's in play, you just see it like it's like an orchestra, like a symphony going on. But it's... To get to that place is...
I mean that is the approach that I suppose the kind of book condones, which is the delabeling of individuals. That's part of the reintegration ritual. When somebody has done something wrong, it doesn't mean that they're forever wrong, but we use terminology that frames them as other. We use the words offender, ex-offender, ex-con, ex-prisoner. And... that's unfair. Somebody who once did something wrong in that it caused harm is not that thing. That thing is a historic event now. So, there must be ways of kind of restoring communities. And for me, that's not the case of the prison. I don't think prison does that. And traditional approaches to crime do that. Outside of the case of sort of criminality and whatnot, if we just think about social harmony, approaches to social harmony and living sort of fruitfully together and flourishing as humans, we just need interconnection and, again, interbeing, don't we? And that's something that I'm increasingly interested in. I'm reading lots of Thich Nhat Hanh, which I've probably mispronounced at the moment, this kind of philosophy of interbeing and being in a state of inter-R, and I'm really interested in that. So
It's funny that you say it, because I think you mentioned earlier about my philosophical take, and there was a part of you that, though you saw my philosophy, let's say, you minimized it, but really because you're exploring it and you're actually fascinated by it. But it's like that kind of coming to that place. Like, you are a pretty complex guy. I recognize it because I'm a complex guy. And I think this whole podcast is exploring that you are a caring person that is, really looking to make change. And you're now going in this more inward journey, that you're actually going, let me reflect this, because you really want to make an impact. And that's what I come out of from this, is that, you're going to be a big player in this world. You're going to do something, even though there's nothing really to do, let's say. But once you recognize it in yourself, and I feel like the divine order of things, that you give yourself permission not to take all that burden on you. You can give your burden up. For those who are religious, may say give your burden to God, but ultimately it's not your burden to carry. So when you free yourself and you can live lightly, then you're accessing your higher self. Because when you feel this sort of suppression, or you feel there's some things out of your control, you tend to go into the amygdala, because then we become emotional, and that is our idiot self. When we give it up and we see the divine order, then we go into our higher self and go, there's nothing to change. It's just a matter of me expressing my love in the form that I've been given in this time here, and time, space, now and here. This is it. That's how it's going to show up. And I don't need to feel guilty. I don't need to feel shame. And I'm saying for myself, because I had to suppress my own light because of all the guilt and shame I had in the past. But when I free of myself of that, as I keep freeing myself of that, I'm not saying I'm there now. I'm on my journey, but this is how it looks. And I'm willing to have a conversation like this and say things like this, that people are just going to go, oh my God, he's saying that, victims are, I'm opening myself out there, because I understand that I've been down that road. I've been on the other side. I've looked at, and agreed and said, he's, whatever. Though I don't think I was ever really like that for some reason. Like somebody wanted to, I don't know, shame somebody or I don't know. Maybe I have been a few times. I'm suppressing that that moment of time, but ultimately, whatever I think I'm condemning something for doing wrong, I've done myself. I just haven't been willing to see it, how and when I've done it. And I think, and whatever I've judged, I have to say, has stuck to me until I've learned that lesson. So I think for everybody, just be mindful not to judge and point the finger and say anything is wrong or right, because then otherwise we have to live through that experience, or we just haven't loved that part of ourselves that we're condemning. We just haven't loved it yet. We just suppressed it. Once we liberate that part of ourselves, then we just recognize everybody as ourselves. That we're all souls just on a journey, and there is no such thing as morality and wrong or right, really. But once we label it, we can then make order of the world, and then we can actually make money off it to a degree, because then you have all these systems in place that sort of perpetuate this illusion. And that is ultimately what the old earth is all about. It's very hard to, know you're in it or not until you able to discern between your own self and your own morality and what you've judged. And then you can then make that, inclination of going, you can only do that once you step away from it. You have to pull away from it and see it from a different perspective.
Yeah. You're right about not knowing that you're in it, for sure. And that for me is where a conscious negotiation, a constant noticing and naming of our kind of inner narrative is important, and it's been like a really nice discovery for me over the past few years. Again, acceptance and commitment therapy, just amazing. The gift that keeps on giving.
The
gift that keeps on giving.
No, what did you say before? The therapy.
Acceptance and commitment therapy. It's a really nice kind of framework that's just really about discovering greater adaptiveness and flexibility to the things that may come at us,
My man, absolutely. This is a journey, and I'm loving the fact that you're going on your journey in the psychotherapy. As I said, it's to have that space to talk, like even now, there's something can be freeing. but obviously this is on camera and there's microphones and stuff. So
I'm kind of used to it now.
And I feel like, some people might be like, God, he put him on the spot a little bit. And some people might say, well, you put me on the spot a little bit. Yeah. But, you can give as good as you take. And at the end of the day, this was all out of a loving space,
Yeah, sure. No, it's always nice to come here and, first of all, enjoy your work, but also to have a chat with you and to kind of experiment with these ideas. So maybe we should do another one after I've been through 10 sessions of psychotherapy.
I was just thinking the same thing. I'm actually doing another course. I finished it, but I think I'm listening to about the third time now, and I'm the prophecy experience. And I'm jumping on his next course in June, July. I sound like he's sales rep or something. Mm-hmm. But it goes into even deeper connection of the universal laws into every element there is. So I know, it's like, go through this course, but if I'll send you the details to this other course. If it's something, can I listen to it when I'm like, doing my stuff, exercising, running around?
It's the best.
Because I like when somebody's summarized. I mean, this man he says it, his mission was to be the most intelligent person there is with regards to human behavior, to debunk the whole sort of paradigm of things, that people don't need to grieve for more than 4 hours. That's it. Like collapsing all these illusions and seeing the divine order. And you have this smart man he sounds like somebody out of The Simpsons, like that kind of guy. Mm-hmm. And but I can hear him all day long, because he talks with such certainty and love of what he does because he can talk for 16 hours a day, and you're hearing for like 100 hours, but there's so much wisdom because he's done all the research to absorb all of these books and all these conversations, and he lives on a boat called The World, and he's with Nobel Peace Prize winners, and that's all he surrounds himself with. So it's sort of trusting where the information comes from. There's certain viewpoints he might have, or certain characteristics I may see that go, okay, I can see why he's, we're about standing on the shoulders of giants at the end of the day. And I feel like he's just saving me 50 years of reading, summarizing it. And I think it'd be really quite interesting for you to go through that, but it's quite something.
Yeah. Keep me involved, for sure. And let's keep in touch and make sure that we look to the next discussion.
Absolutely, brother. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Final words?
No, I don't think so. I'm looking forward to enjoying a coffee, though.
All right, let's get you a coffee. Garçon.
Yeah, no, just thank you. Thanks for your interest in chatting to me. It's always a privilege to come and be able to listen and sort of be heard too and share the same space. So
I just wanted to bring you on so I could, be like a pirate and hijack, and go on and have this whole conversation. No, I'm kidding. I just enjoyed, having our conversations and challenges and a bit of ding,
sure,
sparring sessions. And, I hope it was interesting for everybody listening. Oh, final thing. If your life was a movie.
Ooh, sounds good.
What kind of movie would it be?
Oh, great question. It would be very similar to American Beauty, I think. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
My favorite, one of my favorite films. As with Good Will Hunting, obviously. A bit of Good Will Hunting in there, a bit of American Beauty. American Beauty is such an incredible film because I think it really cuts to the core of a sort of rich existential problem, which is that there are socially approved ways of being that we don't have to follow, but we do. The American dream, the sort of white fenced house, the marriage and the kids, and the humdrum existence of going to work for a company that you don't really kind of love, and it challenges that kind of prescribed way of being in a beautiful way. So I love that, and I'd throw a bit of the cynicism and skepticism for that way of life into my kind of movie, and lots of Good Will Hunting. The tortured soul archetype, love all of that. Robin Williams, incredible. That moment on the bench in Boston, which I went to and sat on and just kind of lived that little moment in my head. So yeah, it would be that kind of film, What would we categorize that as? A sort of drama, a visceral commentary on life. It would be richly existential. It would be philosophical and unnecessarily long, probably.
Unnecessarily long. Some people might say, like this podcast.
Yeah,
I take responsibility for that one. All right, man. Well, I appreciate that. That kind of interesting. I'm sure if we do this again, maybe just after the summer or just before, maybe your movie might shift a little bit.
Yeah, maybe. That's the beauty of existence, isn't it? Everything moves quicker than you think as well. Yeah.
Like the swirling motion, like American Beauty of the leaves moment.
Or Forrest Gump, the feather. That's another cracking movie.
Another cracking. Oh, mate, I've watched that like 20 times.
Oh, yeah.
It's just
amazing.
Every time.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
We'll
Let's
do it
share a
again
coffee
soon.
Together, off camera.
Yeah, let's let the real conversation begin. All right. Thank you, guys. Much love. We vibe when you subscribe.